Welcome to Checks and Balances. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And this week, we're joined by Dean Anderson, CEO of Kernel, for a quick chat about his experience in the market, what is Kernel, and how he got started.
Great. Okay, Dean, very happy to have you here today. Bit of a chit chat, talk about your experience, talk a little bit about Kernel. Happy to be here.
Very excited.
Great. So for those who don't know, maybe we'll give a little bit of insight into Kernel. I guess a little bit of background first around Lighthouse and Kernel's relationship. So it first started Friday afternoon. I think Dean walked upstairs with a box of beers. And Mike, that's always a great way to start a relationship at Lighthouse.
I mean, you never show up empty-handed, right?
No. So if you do want to get to know us a little bit better, Friday afternoon, 41 High Street, rock up with a box of beers, talk about, we can have a chit chat. So after the couple of beers, we actually realized that Kernel's got a very good offering, relatively early in your stage. And now it's part of our offering with our clients when we're building financial plans. Dean, do you want to maybe give us a little bit of background on Kernel for those that don't know?
So Kernel is an investment manager. We run a growing range of index funds, and we also have a full online investing platform that users can log into, create an account, and invest with. We work across the spectrum, so financial advisors, right through to iwi, charity, first-time investors. We just want to build great products that deliver better long-term wealth for Kiwis.
Okay, and what makes you sort of, I guess, your place in the market? Where are you adding value? Who are you trying to attract?
I think the big thing for us was when we set up, it was let's build something today that actually uses fresh technology that's digital first. Financial services, as you all know, the sector is dominated by institutions running on old technologies who don't care about the customer. And actually the reality is they're running pretty old processes. And so the idea was, well, if you started with a clean sheet of paper, you could build something that was far smarter, far better experience, and actually designed to give a better outcome for a customer.
Yeah. And in terms of that platform, in terms of the fee structure, in terms of the offering, I think you've got something pretty special.
Yeah, look, and we're still fairly young. We're a couple of years old. We've got a lot that we want to be doing still. Last year, we were the fastest growing investment manager in New Zealand.
Nice.
And so we want to continue on that momentum and extend the product range and really just center it on good products, good outcomes, and good relationships with customers.
So you don't just start as CEO of Kernel. I assume there's a little bit of history before that. You just don't turn up one day and go, hey, let's get a bit of capital and start up a fund. Tell us a little bit about your history. How did you get started and how did you end up here?
So my background was I obviously studied finance and then ended up after my second job. My first job was actually working in the energy space. Then got a job at the NZX, the New Zealand Stock Exchange. And in that, I got involved in a number of areas. Part of that was actually working in a funds management arm. So NZX has its own funds management business. I was involved in launching and building index funds, and that really got me into the world of index funds, long-term investing plans, and became passionate about what you could do in that space and where the world was heading to. We're in New Zealand, we're at the bottom of the world. We kind of lag sort of some of the other innovations that are happening in other markets and sort of sitting there going, okay, if you looked at what was happening in the States and what was happening even in Australia, they sort of 10 years ahead in terms of Australia with superannuation. It's like, okay, this is going to be a big growing area that's going to really fundamentally change how people are engaged with their money.
That's interesting, Mike. I mean, you spent a couple of years in the UK, which you like to remind me pretty much on a daily basis. When you went and spent those couple of years and kind of saw where the finance sector was at compared to New Zealand, you must have seen a huge difference.
Yes and no, not going to lie. So much to Dean's point, when I went to the UK and kept working in the banking industry, I went in there, I was like, the technology, it's going to be phenomenal. Like it's, trillions of dollars under management, cash going everywhere. It's going to be amazing. No, to be honest,
the amount of things that are done on spreadsheets still at $1 trillion organizations, right?
Honestly, working with the more established, large, I'm not going to name names, but you can probably pick the ones out in the UK that have been around for 200, 300 years, whatever. They're still running DOS systems. It's pretty crazy. So it is almost the same, but there's a real dichotomy, and you can really see the divide there between the challenger banks and the young players in the industry who get to start with a fresh piece of paper paper. And that actually makes, the technology, the experience, what customers are able to do and the speed that they're able to do it and the ease actually creates a meaningful difference to the customer. And I think, to your point, that's something that Kernel brings as well.
Yeah, and I think, the system and financial services, a lot of trust has been lost from those traditional institutions, post GFC, etc. Surveys in the US now, I think people are far more likely to trust a fintech than a traditional financial services player. And so the world is changing. COVID has accelerated it, right? COVID highlighted in an instant that we need to be digital first. And most institutions are. And so that was the whole point of where Kernel came from.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Opening a bank account in New Zealand, having to go in and sit down and sign paper and give ID, whereas the bank I was with in the UK doesn't have any branches. It was like, and I can get fully AML'd, like in 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh man alive, this is going back with a few years.
To your point though, around like kind of the split with the UK, doing UK pension transfers, the paper, you post it there, you post it back. I completely kind of get where you're coming from. So Dean, you're spending your time at NZX. What were the learnings from your time there?
Oh, look, it was a really interesting experience. I spent 6.5, 7 years there, which is actually, in the context of the stock exchange, quite a long time. There was a couple of CEOs and a bit of turnover. It's a fast-paced world. It highlighted how on the outside you perceive this big shiny thing, and on the inside it's actually very different. I think the thing that most people probably get astounded with the stock exchange is somebody says stock exchange, I think everybody jumps to the idea of the US market and everybody yelling and screaming and things. And we had schools come in and it's like, where is everything? Because ultimately it is kind of, exactly. Everything's outsourced, digital kind of to a degree. And so you learned a lot. It really reinforced for me that I wanted to set up a business that was really genuinely putting the customer first in the decision-making processes. It's really common with any organization. You'll have consultants come in or others, and it's always emphasizing around how do we cut costs or how do we maximize these profits. Very few conversations center around what is in the interest of the end user and customer. And so that was where we came from.
The interest in the end user is a really good one. Mike, you can probably talk to this as well. The customers who we talk to where they've maybe spoken to a financial advisor before and either had experiences where they're paying really high fees or feel like they're being pushed into a product that kind of, and that's where we're trying to sit as well, is that kind of just everything focused on the end user, giving like the best experience you can possibly give.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's really common throughout the financial service industry. And there's a lot of barriers to entry for the average person as well around cost, jargon. It's intimidating, all of that sort of stuff, and that's why we love some of the newer players in the industry who make it easier for people to access and easier for people to make better financial decisions.
There are barriers to do that as well. Like for us, the hurdles to get into the space are huge. The compliance, the capital, it's designed to keep things where they are, not to rock the boat.
Speaking about not rocking the boat, so I think you guys are rocking the boat. So you're at the NZX. Where does the idea from Kernel kind of come from? And then also the leap. The leap must have been.
Well, the leap was really interesting because I left NZX in 2018. I'd been there sort of 6.5 years. There was no intention actually at the time. I'd spent a lot of time in the index fund type space. It was a really interesting moment. I had a couple of good relationships with a manager and we'd bought a business and they had stepped out of as well. And I handed them my notice with no plan of where I was going to go or what I was going to do.
Nice.
It was a genuine, right, I've kind of felt like I've done my time here. I want to see what happens next. And part of that was, I guess, had made some investments prior. So I had some security to go, actually, I can afford to be out of work on the market for a period of time. And I just want to see what's going to happen. And so I did a bit of contracting and then thought, bugger it, actually, we can do this smarter. If I'm ever going to do it, now's the time to do it. But I look back on that and going, I think for anybody, like speaking to one of my old bosses there, the best thing that ever happened to them was actually being made redundant. It's actually for anybody some point in their life to just take a leap of faith moment and let's see what happens or follow a passion. I know that's not possible for everybody, but bringing that back to investing, that is one of the benefits of why you should invest, because it gives you that freedom of choice to go and make decisions that either you're passionate about or want to start a business or whatever it may be. And so that was the kind of backdrop to
Yeah.
NZX.
And I mean, I can relate to a lot of those things in terms of the going through the restructures, the taking the leap, what's the unknown, feelings at the time, all of those sort of things, but kind of being led by purpose. So we've spoken a little bit about Kernel, spoken a little bit about your kind of career history. Let's flip it a little bit and talk about you personally with your investing.
Yeah.
Best investment you've ever made?
Reality is the things that set me up for Kernel, I have had a broad range of investments. Property did very well. If you think back a number of years, that was the times when you could buy a property with 5% deposit. And so in terms of an entry point, I guess that was a fortunate moment. I was early 20s, effectively bought a house for $20,000, and then over sort of 5-6 years that grew and had capital growth. And so that worked very well. That helped set up and gave me the freedom of choice to go and do things like setting up Kernel. But property initially, obviously Kernel is my core asset now. 100% of everything I do is in Kernel.
All in, baby.
It is. So it's been a mix. And then outside of that, there's some really interesting things around just regularly investing into boring vanilla index funds.
Yeah. Mike, best investment?
Outside of investing in yourself, so like an actual investment.
All right, mate. All right.
The Botox. No. Yeah, there's no movement. Yeah. No, it's got to be property, right? It's very difficult to sort of to look outside of that. Actually, you know what? Probably I would say outside of, I'll try and give you something different than just property, is allocating more of my salary to employee stock purchase programs at the startups I worked at was really good for me on a couple of fronts. One, we've talked about it before. You give me money, I'm probably going to spend it. So, if it comes out of my salary beforehand, I don't see it, right? And two, the ability to get in, not on the ground floor, but at a really good time in a company that you believe in. Everyone was sort of all rowing in the same direction, because you're in the weeds, has been really good for me as well. Yeah.
I must say the check that turns up every 6 months from a startup you work for is good fun to be like, I wonder what the number's going to be.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, we just sold to Moody's for 100 million. Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay.
I work there.
What about yourself?
Buying my first property that's now an investment property, it's doubled in value. That does make a big difference. Yeah. And then similar in terms of Lighthouse, we're all in, baby. Yeah. We're going to secure Kiwi's financial futures.
Yeah, I just want to jump in with all of what we've just talked about. There is an element of taking action and making the investment. And while you might look at this and go, well, hey, I never got the option to go in on a startup in the UK or States or something, or I couldn't buy a house with 20 grand or, that sort of thing. Yep, absolutely. I don't want people to get discouraged. It is about taking action and getting involved and making an investment. That is the point that we want to stress.
And there is no single answer, right? Having a mix of things, property, investing in share market, etc., is key. Yep. It's not, don't put everything, just thinking that's the one solution. And to your point, like property is a high barrier to entry. Oh, yeah. Particularly today, you have to have a lot of money. But so that's where things like Kernel is like, there are a lot of other options to how do you get on that pathway, start building wealth. You can invest with $1 in a diversified fund and start putting away some of your salary into the share market and letting it compound and grow. And so that is the whole point, that how do you build up your wealth? And there are a range of channels for that.
I want to go worst investment.
Yeah,
I want to cover that as well, because we all make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Hell, I know exactly what one mine is.
We're talking about investment mistakes. Yeah. A2 milk. That's about 60%.
It's just a long list.
Yeah.
So I think what James is actually saying there, because
James is saying don't pick stocks and invest in index funds.
Mike.
Oh, I know for sure what mine is. So I was fresh in university, went to Finance 101, probably a couple of lectures in, and I was like, I'm basically Warren Buffett now. I am the Rain Man. Saw a headline on some news and thought, that's pretty bad for that country. I'm going to short their currency. And then I was like, so got a group of us together. We all chipped in.
You pulled others into this game.
Syndicated funds, and then we leveraged. And then I might lose my license for this. And then we all syndicated, went in, and I was like, guys, this is basically a sure thing. Like just think about where they are in the world. Think about where we are. Think about the time difference. When that market opens, we're gonna, and like honestly, it would just like instantly, as soon as something happens or the market or whatever happened, it just went bang in the opposite direction, and we lost not just everything but more. So I had to chip in more money to cover the position. So that was easily my worst investment decision. Lost it all plus some in the space of about 3 seconds.
Yeah. So for those that have been wondering where Vincent Michael is, he's now at Lighthouse. His name is now Michael Vincent. You can come to 41 High Street with your baseball bats and hunt him down. Dean, you're up.
I actually haven't had any real speculative investments. But on the flip side, there is also the other of you sometimes have investments that you wish you held on to.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look back and go, shit, that was a mistake of having sold that. Even real left field stuff. Like I bought a 1960s Land Rover for $1,800. I sold it, shouldn't have sold it for like $4,500. Now it's like $50,000 to get that car. So there's the flip side of sometimes you screw things up and lose money. Sometimes you also look back and go, shit, I wish I hadn't done that. Or
I wrote one of those off on Waiheke Island one day, but that's a story for a different day.
Yep. Okay, Dean, have you enjoyed the chit chat?
It's been fantastic. I've learned a lot. I've learned to watch out for Vincent Michael and, and that exactly.
Unsubscribe to the syndicate.
Yeah.
Let us know what you thought of the chit chat. If you'd like us to do more of them, who you'd like us to get on and kind of have a little bit of a chin wag with. Thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe, give us a review. We'll catch you next week.
Cheers.
Chin wag?
Chin wag.
Do we not like chin wag?